Well, hello again, guys, from Singapore to Seoul to here in my front room in Gosforth. And just for a quick Alexander Isak update, there's been a lot of noise around this in the last 2 or 3 days. I think there'll be a lot of noise around it in the next 2 or 3 days too. But I've got a lot of questions coming into me on X, on social platforms, on YouTube as well, on the community tab, which thank you so much for engaging in that. So I just thought I'd give a quick recap almost, because nothing has massively moved on. We still are fundamentally where we were 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, even going back further than that. So there's a couple of things I want to address, and also a little update as to where I think it is currently at. Now, just to state this, Alexander Isak isn't not playing for Newcastle and not training with his teammates right now because he's been told he isn't for sale. That's not the case. He can see that the club are trying to bring in those replacements. They are trying to facilitate that sale by trying to find Sesko, going all in on Sesko the way they did last week, pursuing João Pedro, Liam Delap, others as well. Before that, they want to bring in that replacement, which in turn would be the domino for Isak to go. Now, the reason he is conducting himself the way he is to make sure they don't stop doing that. Because if Alexander Isak all of a sudden, and I'm playing devil's advocate here, I'm not justifying this conduct at all. That's an entirely different matter, my opinion on it. But if Alexander Isak says, okay, tell you what, guys, yeah, I'm going to train, I'm going to play, that might just decelerate Newcastle's search for that replacement. But while they are unable to bring in that player or players, and with each passing day, the likelihood of Alexander Isak staying at Newcastle, well, that increases. And the biggest card, the strongest hand Newcastle have got in terms of reintegrating him to the group, if it comes September the 1st and they haven't been able to find that replacement and the move to Liverpool hasn't gone through, the biggest hand they can say, can play to the player is, we tried. It wasn't as if we said to you all summer, Alex, you're going nowhere. You're going absolutely nowhere. We're not going to try and bring in a replacement. You can rot in the reserves for all we care. That's not the case. Now, I said in the video on Friday night, is Alexander Isak for sale? No, he's not for sale. That's the answer we got back 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. It's the answer we're getting back today. It's the answer we'll get back tomorrow. But will he be sold? We'll see. That's a different question with a different answer. However, scenario A is that Newcastle don't sell Alexander Isak, that he, for want of a better phrase, comes to his senses and says, okay, guys, I'm really sorry. I appreciate what you've done for me. You're not going to find a replacement. I come back in now. That's scenario A for Eddie Howe, for you guys as Newcastle supporters, and for the hierarchy too. But while Isak continues to conduct himself the way he is and declares himself, to all intents and purposes, unavailable to train and unavailable to play, Newcastle are exploring that replacement. But if it gets to September the 1st and they haven't been able to find a replacement, Alexander Isak surely in his camp must see the optics of that and realise that the best option for him going forward is to say, okay, you've tried, I'll come back in, much like he did last season. His head wasn't in the building coming out of the end of 2 seasons ago, evidenced by the first 7 matches of the season where he scored 1 goal and Eddie went public by throwing a little bit back at him in the media. And that was all on the back of the story I've broken and written and repeated repeatedly, yeah, that makes sense. I've said it that many times now. That Alexander Isak and his camp were absolutely miffed and felt cheated and felt as if they'd missed out on something by the removal of what they thought was a contract that was to come. They resented a year's worth of missing out on an extra £100,000 a week, say, for argument's sake. What's that? Gross, £5 million. They think they were owed that money. That is part of the reason why they want to go. There's also the sporting side of it, to be fair to the player. He's given Newcastle 3 good years. He sees Liverpool, Premier League champions, will be favourites for the league again, will be one of the favourites for the Champions League. There's a sporting element to this too. There's also Isak's concerns about no players coming in 3 windows, no training ground, no stadium, what he thought was the project he bought into, perhaps not being so, other than everything Eddie and his staff and his teammates have delivered. They've absolutely delivered on their side of the project. So Isak wanting to go is multi-layered, and I understand that. I don't necessarily agree with how he's gone about it, but the reason he's continuing to do so is to make sure that Newcastle don't stop looking for a replacement. He hasn't been told you're going nowhere, you're going to rot. Clearly evidenced by the fact that they went after Benjamin Sesko in the manner they did. João Pedro before that, Hugo Ekitike. If any of those players had come in, Alexander Isak would be on his way to Liverpool by now. Now, I've said this for a long time. The elements to this deal are twofold for it to happen. Newcastle need to find a replacement or replacements, and then they need to negotiate that deal with Liverpool, whereby they are extracting what they feel is maximum value. I really don't think, guys, the second part of that will be the problem. The problem is Newcastle not being able to find a player or players who leave them significantly worse off if they allowed Alexander Isak to go. Evidenced by the fact that they've got to a point on a list now where they're asking questions about a young guy at Porto, Samu, who has only done it for one season in the Portuguese league. There are loads of others. Go Geordie again, loads of others ahead of him on the list. I've made an informal inquiry. My information back, as I said on Saturday night. £80 million the quota. That's not a deal they're doing. That's not value. That makes no sense. Samu, we're told, is going nowhere. Where do they go from here? Well, Johan Wissa would be a start, but that is being held up by the property chain. More on Alexander Isak and property in just a second. By the domino effect. Brentford need a replacement before they sell Wissa, but they want Dango Ouattara from Bournemouth, who need a replacement before they sell Ouattara. So that's where Newcastle are stuck with Wissa. That's why Isak remains where he is. As I said, guys, scenario A is, and we'll even put scenario B in there. Scenario A is that Alexander Isak says now, tell you what, I'm ready to come back in. I can see that you've tried. Scenario B, I still think scenario B is that Newcastle get the replacements they want, and an unhappy player who is clearly a toxic presence now, clearly, the move to Liverpool happens at a good value, at a fair rate. That is scenario B. Scenario C, and this with each passing day is becoming more likely, is that Alexander Isak stays at Newcastle against his will, wishes, which there will be, absolutely, but having tried and failed to get those replacements in, he says, okay, guys, I'll come back in and I'll play next season. I'll train. And do you know what? I've got that as scenario C. With each passing day, minute, hour, that becomes more likely. Because come September the 1st, I don't think Alexander Isak, if this deal didn't happen, would say, no, I'm not playing. That's no good for anybody. And I honestly think you guys, I'm talking Newcastle supporters here, I realise there's Liverpool fans watching, and thank you for the interaction. It's toxic on other platforms. Below the line on here, I've seen nothing but fair debate and fair comment. I think you guys, as Newcastle fans I'm talking to here, I think you would be okay with that. I think if Alexander Isak, in that eventuality, came out and said what he should say and what he had to say and apologised and came back in and started scoring goals again, that would be okay. That could happen. The sources very close to it are telling me that that is an increasing likelihood. I still think before that, and we're talking percentages now, I think I was 60-40 last week in favour of Isak going. I'll come down to 55-45 now. I still think that Newcastle are looking. They are looking for those players that then would in turn be the domino to facilitate Isak going. And Liverpool would absolutely come back, I think, with an acceptable package. Would it be as high as £150 million? Maybe not. It might get close to that with add-ons. But I don't think the clubs negotiating a deal would be a problem. The problem here is those players coming in. Now, in the short term, what does that mean for Newcastle and what they do with regards to striker? Well, Alexander Isak isn't going to all of a sudden put his hand up to play at Aston Villa. Definitely not. They're going to go with Anthony Gordon there. Wissa from Brentford, that's held up again. I've heard positive noises for days and days and days on this. Talk of an Ouattara medical being booked in at Brentford. Good sources, I believe that to be the case. But until Bournemouth allow that to happen, it's not going to happen. So here we are. Isak is stuck. Newcastle are stuck. Brentford are stuck. Bournemouth are stuck. Ouattara is stuck. Wissa is stuck. Everything is stuck. Nothing really fundamentally has changed, has moved on. This has been the case now for 2 or 3 weeks, guys, since I broke this story. There's food being moved around the plate to an extent, you see, with some of the noise on the back of it. Another question that's coming to me a lot. A story today about Alexander Isak putting his house on the market. Now, this has been around for a few weeks now, guys. And I was going to run this story at the time in July. And I spoke to people and I thought better of it because I didn't think it was fair, because Alexander Isak was always going to move from the house he is currently in Ponteland. It's been on the market since for a month or so now, I think, or certainly since July. The listing was first sent to me. And I was told that no, he was always going to move. It was a 12-month lease, and because he'd been burgled there twice, even if he stayed or stays a Newcastle player, what I'm told is that he had no desire to remain in that house. Now, he's got no desire, really, to remain on Tyneside. Of course he wants to go. You know, the house probably would have gone on the market regardless. But I'm told with regards to that property itself, yeah, the reason is, and it's been on the market for a month now, he's been burgled twice there, guys. He didn't want to stay there. So if he does stay at Newcastle, he'll be moving elsewhere. If he doesn't stay at Newcastle, he'll be moving to Merseyside, clearly. So that is where we are currently at. It's stuck. Isak doesn't want to play or train with Newcastle right now as it stands. That might change. I think from his perspective, again, I'm playing devil's advocate now, it would weaken his position if he indicated a willingness to train or play. That's why he is where he is. Newcastle clearly cannot have him around the group when the strongest word Newcastle United manager Eddie Howe has said all summer is united. He can't have a player who will cause and create division if he puts him back in training or back in the squad. So right now they're having to go without him. That's why they've been looking elsewhere. There's an acceptance from many on the inside that probably is in the best interest if they can move this on and move it on quickly. That hasn't been able to be the case. Deals for all of those players have fallen down. They haven't gone through. That's why maybe Alexander Isak will be a Newcastle player next season. It's all still to play for. As Eddie said at the weekend, all options and eventualities are on the table right now. I hope that has cleared things up a little bit. It's where I understand the situation to be. So yes, guys, thank you for watching. I'll put a link in the description below the line. It's only $1.99 a month to join Mail Plus. Loads of content to come on there this week. And majority, loads and loads. $1.99 a month to join. The piece I'm going to put below the line is myself end of last week exploring some of the alternatives. There we go. Quick little Alexander Isak update from here in my front room. I don't want to sell my house. My house isn't for sale. But if this is a clumsy analogy, I'll go with it. But if someone come along and put a load of rats under the floorboards, and then I was given an alternative couple of houses or a nice big house down the road, I might think, actually, do you know what? Yeah, this house isn't for sale, but perhaps it's in the best interest of everybody. If I do sell and I do move on. Was that a clumsy analogy? It's the best I've got off the top of my head. Thank you so much for watching, guys. Like, comment, subscribe. I'll be back at the end of the week after Eddie Howe's press conference, looking ahead to a game of football. Get in, game of football. I can't wait. Down at Aston Villa. See you soon. Bye-bye.